Well, good morning. I'm Bernie Niemeier, President and Publisher of Virginia Business Magazine, and we're here today for our second annual Economic Expectations Roundtable with the Virginia Society of CPAs. These roundtables are one of the ways that our editors get around the state of Virginia and learn what's going on in different industries. And in the pages of the magazine, we can share that information with folks about what may be going on in their own industry as well as the industry of the customers. Today on our panel, starting on my far left, we have John Renner, CPA, Principal and Owner at Renner Company, CPAs in Alexandria, representing Northern Virginia on the panel. John's right is Jimmy Haggard, CPA, a partner at Dixon, Hughes, Goodman, and Newport News, representing Hampton Roads on the panel. To his right, we have Mike Gracik, Managing Partner at Keiter and Glen Allen, representing Central Virginia. And to his right, we have Jennifer Duff, CFO at Management Stack in Salem, Virginia, representing Southwest. And our two editors, we have Veronica Garabelli from Virginia Business and Robert Powell from Virginia Business. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn the microphone over to our editors so we can get started. Thank you.
All right, Jennifer, we're going to start with you. In comparison to last year's survey, only a few more CPAs this year say the economy has reached full recovery. What gaps in the economy are they seeing?
Well, I believe that employment growth is a major factor in the economy and how people view it, and that's an issue near and dear to my heart, being from Southwest Virginia. We've recently experienced numerous job losses in the area from some of the bigger companies like Norfolk Southern. Home Shopping Network has announced that they're leaving the area, and Advance Auto Parts also. So it's certainly an issue that we've seen in Southwest Virginia. And while the employment growth numbers are trending positive across the state, it is regional, because in Southwest Virginia, it's actually, we have negative growth at the moment. And while across the state there are positive averages, they are trending much lower than the national average. So this certainly is an issue that we need to address in Virginia in terms of job growth.
Okay. Mike, a high percentage of CPAs in the survey said that the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, is hurting the economy. Do you expect problems with health care to become worse next year because of the employer mandate affecting companies with 50 or more employees?
We do expect the problems to be worse next year, partly due to the mandate, but partly with what you see with rising costs for all insurers. That supposedly the act was supposed to provide for lower cost insurance, but now with everything that we're seeing with our clients and with my own firm's experience, the costs of health insurance are going up. We spend a lot of time, we had to do our own firm renewal this past year, and the hours we had to spend dealing with the rate increases and trying to find a good solution for our associates. It was a tremendous amount of time, and the extra cost and the extra time is just rippling through our clients and rippling through the economy, at least as we see it here.
Jimmy, 2/3 of respondents are opposed to the expansion of Medicaid. The business community has been divided on this issue. Why do you think so many CPAs are opposed to the expansion?
I think the primary drawback to the expansion of CPAs is the coverage of cost, how that cost is going to be handled, who's going to pay for that. Is it going to be by what's deemed to be the wealthier individuals in the marketplace, or specifically who is going to cover that? I think the concern is initially, while there have been some promises at the federal level that those costs would be covered at least for the first year and possibly the first couple of years, incrementally, states are going to be required to pick up a larger percentage, up to 10% over a 3 or 4 year period. And I think with states' budgets being as constrained as they are now, it's going to be very, very difficult for states to cover those costs. So I think the state election is probably appropriate. The other side of that argument is, who are those individuals that are typically covered by Medicaid? And it's, the elderly. It's those with physical handicaps, it's children, it's lower income families. So, I think the concern is somewhat tied to the Affordable Care Act, that if you expand Medicaid, now that the people are involved with the Affordable Care Act and have their own insurance policies, will they then transition to Medicaid? And so I think there's some major concerns there from that perspective.
And just to add to Jimmy's comments, a lot of concern that there are a lot of other budget things in the state that need to be addressed to help the economy. For instance, infrastructure, which we'll probably talk about later, and there's no trust that the federal government will help pay the costs the way they're supposed to, and other much more needed programs will suffer as a result.
I think there are also concerns about quality of health care. That's what I've heard a lot of, and would expanding that while it's helping more people, are we degrading the quality of our system in doing so?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's a bigger issue. You're incurring additional costs, but the quality of healthcare overall is not going to be improved.
John, many respondents to the survey said that partisanship is preventing government from addressing important issues. Is that why many CPAs support the creation of an independent, bipartisan redistricting commission?
I think so. You know, Dick Slasar told us a long time ago, the power is, when your party in power, you have the control of doing everything. But the problem is right now, we're not getting anything done. We don't have any moderates in there to be able to make some compromises. So we've got to do something to do it. I don't know how an independent commission is going to be picked up to be able to do that, but we really need to do something to get things moving so that we can get the economy going, getting business back into the forefront. Because business is really the generator. It's the horsepower. It runs the economy. And if we can't keep our businesses going, we can't get things out of our General Assembly in a compromised way, it's just a stalemate. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think just to tap into John's comments, I think partisanship is much more on an even keel during an election year. We seem to get more things done in the General Assembly when everyone is up for election. So that has had, fairly significant impact as well.
Jennifer, infrastructure continues to be the most pressing issue for Virginia, according to the survey. What are the biggest challenges Virginia is facing in terms of infrastructure?
Well, the American Society of Civil Engineers in their 2015 report just gave Virginia a C- in terms of infrastructure and a D in terms of roads. So Virginians aren't the only ones that think there's a problem here. So I think one thing that we need to look at is multimodal transportation. It's certainly regional, definitely in the Northern Virginia areas and the eastern areas of the state. The percentages are much higher of people using modes of transportation other than just driving to work. So we need to continue to expand that throughout the state. I do know that there was a Virginia Road to the Future package that was recently, or in 2013 was passed, that's putting $3 billion back into the transportation infrastructure, which should help the issue, but that's something that we certainly need to address to draw businesses back into Virginia.
But we also need infrastructure in terms of stable electricity, power grids. Our power grid system is very poor, and we need to boost that up. We need to boost up our infrastructure for communications, the internet. We're going more to the cloud, communications. All those, everything is going to have an impact on us. And you're right, we do have, Northern Virginia does have some transportation, metro, but it's not enough. It really needs to be much, much more. And who's going to pay for all this? It came up a few minutes ago. We're all fighting for money. It's a budget issue. And how do we get the budgets to balance? We've got to do something to take care of that. But the infrastructure is extremely important, especially the power grid and the roads. Not just the roads. We've got to find other ways of getting into the neighborhoods in Northern Virginia to get the people. In Alexandria, we have 70,000 people that leave the city every day. We have a big pass-through from Fairfax County to Washington, D.C. We have 70,000 people coming into the city. So why can't we create a system within our own city to be able to take care of that, a transportation system? most of our people go into the district because they're government employees. So it's a lot of issues. It's a big budget issue.
Yeah, it's fairly simple, and we get into a lot of rhetoric about identifying what our infrastructure needs are, and I think that would be a fairly easy thing to do. The bigger issue, how do you fund what our needs are? We're so far behind now. I don't know what that answer would be.
We've had years of neglect that are going to be really expensive to take care of. Central Virginia, we don't suffer as much from the infrastructure issues as the folks in Tidewater, but I believe we have to look at what's best for the state as a whole, and if we can solve the problems in those other areas, everybody in the state will benefit.
And I also think in addition to the roads, I mean, in Southwest Virginia, we don't have a lot of traffic jams going on, especially in the more rural areas, but we have airport problems. It's very difficult to get in and out of Roanoke, and I know that that deters businesses from going there. I've experienced that personally in a former company where we needed to set up a center, and we couldn't do it in Roanoke. Had to go to Charlotte instead, simply because it's too difficult to get in and out of in the airport. So that's another issue that needs to be addressed.
Survey shows that a vast majority of the respondents.
Do you agree with that position?
At the risk of disappointing some of my clients and friends who are deadly against it, I do agree with that position. I think it's good for the economy. I think it helps ensure I'm sure a lot of my clients subscribe to this magazine. Some will be in the hot seat for a while.
It's fairly easy if you live in the eastern part of the state to endorse the pipeline, much easier than if you live in the western part of the state. It is an extremely clean energy source, so as we attempt to identify cleaner sources of energies, it seems to make a lot of sense, and I think from the standpoint of Virginia and where Virginia gets its energy from, I think 50% of our natural gas comes from out of state anyway. So, I think it would be good for the economy, but again, I'm not sure the people in Southwest Virginia, western part of Virginia, would approve of that or think the same way.
I think Dominion's been a very good corporate citizen for the Commonwealth, and I think to minimize the impact. Property is going to go through, but again, Jimmy says, yeah, it's not.
Okay, Jimmy. According to the survey, a pro-business climate and an educated workforce are the top two factors in retaining and attracting businesses to Virginia. How is Virginia faring in those areas, in your opinion?
I think we're not where we need to be. I think we're improving. I think if you go back to maybe mid to late 2014, where the governor created a new Virginia Economy Workforce Initiative that was to focus on secondary education and workforce certifications. It was to focus on the training of people coming out of the military and providing opportunities and incentives for hiring veterans. It was meant to diversify existing businesses. And I think we've made some progress. I still think there are significant ways to go and movement in that area. I think we're headed in the right direction. The cost of workforce training and education, for even those people that are going to four-year colleges, and it's gotten excessive for people. So, those people are going for some period of time, are going for to look for something else to do just because they can't afford, and it's taking them significantly longer. We do a lot of work. One of our national industries is the auto industry. The auto industry group is having difficulty finding qualified technicians. We try and drill into all of our children, and I'm as guilty because I did the same thing with my children, to say you need to go to college, you need to get an education, and those technical trades and certifications that are so valuable to many of the industries that we're trying to attract, we don't have that workforce in place today to meet what we would hope our needs would be. So it's a continual process. I would say we're moving in the right direction, but we're not where we need to be.
I think we're blessed in the state. We have a really great community college system that really does a great job preparing the workforce. But like most colleges and universities in the state, they have severe funding issues, and if we could find a way to increase funding to those organizations, we could improve the quality and numbers of our workforce.
John, many respondents say they're taking steps to improve their work-life balance in their firms. What sort of programs are y'all installing in your firm?
Well, we've been very, very proactive in this area. Since I've had the firm for 30 years, I noticed that in growing up in the profession, there's always been the glass ceiling there. And the firms were just discarding young women because they said, well, gee, they're going to get married and raise a family. And I found my better staff people when I was a manager at that firm were the women, the young ladies. And so when I created my own firm, I created a flexible schedule for them. I wanted to attract the best talent I can get. And so what I did is we worked their work schedules. If there was a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 3, or they could work every other day, we worked it out depending on the type of work. An audit client is a little harder to do that sort of thing with, but with our tax practice and our accounting services practice, it works out very well. And so we've made this flexible schedule, and we've been doing it for about 30 years. And we do have the young ladies and the different people that need that flexible schedule. And it's worked out very well for us. I think we're one of the first firms that probably did it. I'd go to these national conferences and say, oh, we're thinking about these things. I've been doing it for years. And we have a lot of women in our practice. I think the profession is over 50% women now. And it's not just, we're just not realizing it with the young ladies now. It's the young fathers, the new fathers. They want that flexibility too. You can't say you got to be here at 9 and 5, and you can't, it's a joint. The family is a joint effort now to raise that family. And so we've been making the effort to make that happen for both. And I think it's been very successful, and hopefully more people will do that. That's what everybody has to do. Telecommuting works a little bit. It doesn't work that well for us because the software we have is so robust that it's hard to get it through the cloud or the internet or whatever. So we do have all that sort of thing. But I think the flexible schedules, working it out, the clients love it. If they know that somebody's going to be at work from 9 to 3, they'll call and they'll make their arrangements to take care of that. So I think it's worked out well for us.
We're in the in the midst of a major change in our firm culture that we started a few years ago to kind of address this issue, and it involves a lot. It's been kind of tough to a certain extent for the people of my generation to deal with some of the flexible workforce issues where they don't want to be tied to a desk 9 to 5. They want to be able to be out of the office to take care of, to attend social events that are important to them. They want to be able to take a few hours off in the afternoon and work late at night, and you have to try to accommodate that. Folks, they really want a different type of feedback system, and we're looking at that within our firm. Having an annual evaluation is not enough, and not it doesn't really work anymore. The young folks now want a lot more feedback, more constant feedback, and so changing the annual evaluation process is a big priority within our firm.
It's interesting to hear this discussion because I think everybody goes through the same thing. The millennials now, the younger generation, are, when you go through an interview process, while we think we're interviewing them, they are really interviewing us to decide whether we are worthy of having them come to work with us. We've gone through a program and initiated a new tagline called Life Beyond the Numbers. Just because we understand that we, over the years, have provided a lot of lip service to quality of life issues, but it's time to take a stronger stance now. So we want to make sure that we provide those opportunities for people to to take off during the day to the extent that they can when their child's playing in a soccer match or a field hockey game or whatever the case may be. And fortunately, in our profession, to some extent, we can be flexible because the time can be made up. When you get into, telecommunicating, and especially, and I agree with John's comments, from my 30 plus years of experience, females are much better in our profession than males are. They're more detail oriented. So, we need to accommodate and work with them. They did see a glass ceiling for many, many years where I want to start a family, I can only work 2 or 3 days a week. I'm kind of going to become stagnant within this organization. And now I think we look at the quality of the person, what they can bring to the organization. They're not always going to be home with their children, and once their children start to go back to school or reach that age, they're going to want to get out of the house and perhaps continue their career as well. So, the fact that you want to cut back and you want to raise a family and you want to experience quality of life issues and be there should not be an impediment for your growth through an organization or a firm. So, that's extremely important, and it's extremely important to the younger generation.
I think another change we've seen is that I love working with these younger groups because they're really bright and really talented and really creative. They want a voice in what's going on, and you have to make sure that you have avenues where they can express their opinions and that you're actually considering them. You can't just pay lip service to it and not actually evaluate it. You may, at the end, decide to not act on or not follow their voice, but you have to make sure you're communicating to them the reasons why and that you actually did consider it.
Well, millennials certainly do have different expectations. There's no doubt about that. It also brings up another interesting point, all these conversations about the economy. Millennials want what they want for the most part, and if you go interview with somebody, like you said, they're interviewing you, if they don't want the job, if they just go back and live with their parents, which is taking a hit on the GDP because they're getting married later, not buying the houses, not buying the cars. So it really is an interesting, we're about to face an interesting situation in terms of the millennials when it comes to the economy today.
Jennifer, access to credit continues to be a problem. What challenges do businesses face when taking out a loan?
Well, I think that the access to credit is a result of coming out of the recession, obviously. Banks are more conservative and other lending institutions are more conservative in terms of giving money to businesses. One thing that I've personally seen is tightening of ratios. Debt service coverage ratios may be tightening in order to ensure that the banks are comfortable with it. Another big shift that I've seen is in terms of pro forma statements, and it's an interesting sort of catch-22. Banks aren't as willing to rely on the forecast, on the projections, based on the capital injection into the company and what they're looking for. So it's an interesting situation to be in. You need the capital in order to get the results, but the bank wants the results before they give you the capital. So that's the difficulty that I've seen.
I think the Dodd-Frank legislation has had a big impact on the ability of small businesses to place debt with financial institutions. We just bought the office building that we're in, and getting that finance was a tortuous process, mainly due to the requirements placed on the lender by Dodd-Frank. I thought we would never get the thing financed, but ultimately happened, but it was a real pain. That's really stymieing the lending environment.
It's the length of time, too, because if you try to go get a loan today, it'll take you 6 months or more.
Right.
And the banks say, I've got plenty of money, I want to lend you the money, but they don't. They don't think anybody has the cash flow to be able to do it. The economy is struggling, and small businesses are struggling, especially in our area. And they really look at the cash flow. Do you have the ability to pay it? Even though you already got a loan with them and you're paying it back, they don't really pay much attention to that. The regulations are so tight that it's almost impossible to get a loan sometimes.
A lot of opportunities come up with a business where they can't wait 6 months to finance it, to work on the opportunity. They've got to be nimble and quick and be able to jump on the opportunity and close it pretty quickly in order to have a good result. And with this, as John said, it can take 4 to 6 months to close a transaction now, and it really takes a lot of the nimbleness out of the marketplace.
Mike, Virginia has been continuously dropping in CNBC's top states for business since it was ranked as the top state in 2011. What, in your opinion, is the reason for this continued drop?
I think there's a number of factors. I think it may have something to do with our tax rates, mainly more on the local income tax side, as state income tax side, or state tax rate is, in my opinion, somewhat reasonable, but a lot of the local taxes, the B-pull tax and personal property taxes can be a hindrance to cited as favorable for business. I think our infrastructure issues and knowledge about some of the budgetary issues we had in the state government over the past few years are also weighing on that ranking.
Part of the problem is, the state, like Mike said, it's the local governments. They're dependent on personal property and real estate taxes and the B-pull tax. That's all they can really regulate. They can adjust those rates. And so they're looking, and the state, it's a Dodd state, so that says that anything you want to do is you got to go through the General Assembly to be approved. So if you lower the rates on the local jurisdictions, where they're going to get the money to do the things to the infrastructure and all the other things. So there's got to be some sort of workout between. They tried it with the car tax and it failed, but there got to be a balance someplace that the local jurisdictions can do something to raise more revenue for themselves and to attract more businesses into their jurisdictions. Alexandria is a good example. We're one of the highest. We have the highest rates in our B-pull tax. And the city government says, well, that doesn't hurt business. Well, it does, because we've had a lot of big businesses move out because of that. A lot of law firms moved out. We have patent and trade in Alexandria. We thought we were going to get all these patent attorneys come in. Didn't happen in 2004, 2006. We have the U.S. Federal Courthouse in Alexandria. Most of the firms are outside or in the district or in Fairfax. So I think the taxing, it's got to be a balance. It's a balancing issue in the budgets. Somehow the state's got to help out a little bit, even though they're struggling with their budget. But they got to give the localities a little bit more flexibility to do something to attract business and help business. Because, B-pull tax in Alexandria is $30 million. That's a big number. That's probably 10% of their revenue. And so and they won't give it up. They won't give that up because they say we need that money. So they're losing business. We're losing business because of that. And I think that's one of the big reasons why Virginia's having a problem, because each jurisdiction is different. We have clients moving in from Maryland and D.C. all the time. And they say, well, if I go to Arlington, I can get this. And if I go to Fairfax, I get this. And Alexandria charges me this. So it's so much confusion there that they say they just throw up their hands sometimes and say, I'm not coming.
And Virginia is also particularly vulnerable because of the military infrastructure, because of the proximity to D.C. and, of course, the federal money, and the budget sequestrations have really taken a toll and slowed down the economic growth. So I think that's something that's really a problem for Virginia and rankings in the polls.
Yeah, I think those are all very valid points, very, very good points. I think, when you look at all the categories in that CNBC poll, there's some significant fluctuations in certain categories. Others are not that bad, but when you look at things like workforce, where we were ranked 6th out of the 50 states, when you look at education, where we're ranked 6th, I think, out of 50 states, and then being business friendly, we were ranked 3rd. All those things are pretty critical and very, very important. So, I think when you look at things at local taxes or negotiated incentives, some of those things are disincentives for the economy and for growth, and certainly our infrastructure. And as Jennifer points out, in 2013, when that dreaded S word, sequestration, came about. We're looking at that potentially again in 2016. And when you have across the board budgetary cuts, specifically with my friend here to my left in Metro DC area or in Hampton Roads, it impacts all of us throughout the state. There are ripple effects throughout the entire state. So there are a lot of factors there. I think even though we've dipped, to go to the position where we are, we're still in that upper tier, and Virginia's still seen as being, I think, very business friendly.
Jimmy, tax climate was listed as one of the top 2 issues that need to be addressed at the 2016 Virginia General Assembly session. What are the top tax issues CPAs and their clients will face?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it depends on where you are in the tax classifications and what tax bracket you may be in, and whether you're an individual or you're a business. I think you heard Mike and John both kind of articulate from the business perspective what some of those issues are that businesses face, and I think that's going to continue to be an issue, even though that is kind of one of their targeted items to be addressed. I would be very surprised, maybe even shocked, if that is tackled in the next session in 2016.
Seen some things with some of our neighbors where North Carolina, Gracik, right there.
And the real issue becomes, once you go in and you start cutting tax rates, reducing your funding, how are some of these other things going to be funded? You've got to recapture that revenue somehow.
John, the survey shows that respondents feel that Virginia has an adequate talent supply to replenish its workforce. What are some of our strengths in this area, and in what ways could we improve our talent pipeline?
Well, we really do need more talent in the state. In Northern Virginia, the community college is really trying hard. We don't have, with the baby boomers retiring, we're losing a lot of talent in our workforce, and we don't have the replacement going in Northern Virginia that we need. And so the pipeline is trying to get. I know that Northern Virginia Community College we got 6 campuses. We have the healthcare campus that trains nurses and medical professionals in the assistant in the technician areas. I think that's where our pipeline is. We need to get people to really think about it, and it really starts in the schools, in our high schools, and maybe down even further. Talking about, maybe college isn't a technical degree is just as good as a college degree in a lot of cases. These technicians in the hospitals are doing very well. They got good jobs. We need to fill those in. In Northern Virginia, everybody's fighting for CPAs. I mean, I'm sure everybody else in the state is doing the same thing. We don't have enough accountants, pool of accountants to really fund to take care of my firm's needs. With the millennials, they keep moving around. They'll move around every year or so. It seems like they just go to the next firm, to the next firm, to the next firm, until they decide that public accounting maybe is not for them. But it's a workforce that we've got to do something with. The millennials have got to settle down and take hold of what they're doing. We need to really work with our community colleges for the people that aren't going to go to college, 4-year college for a degree. Maybe cut down the costs. Right now they're trying to get college credits into high schools. We've been successful in Prince William County and some in Fairfax County at getting some of those classes in where they can get a jump on their college education to cut down some of that cost. So that can help out with our workforce in the pipeline. And then it can move on to the community college and get their associate's degree and then get into a 4-year college. So I think we really need to work on our young people first. Of course, we have a lot of immigrants, too, that have got a lot of talent, too, in Northern Virginia. And we've somehow got to get them into our workforce and train them into the skills and the culture of the United States. And I think there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts. There's too many moving parts that anybody can take care of. But we are really, I don't think we have as big a workforce as everybody thinks we do.
Yeah, we really don't. The workforce is shrinking as the baby boomer generation ages. And areas that are going to thrive in the next 10, 20 years are going to be the communities that can attract the millennials. As John said, the millennials are a mobile workforce, not just between firms, but between communities. And I know the Greater Richmond Chamber of Commerce has become really active with this issue and making sure that the area is adapting itself to attract millennials to stay here, one, and two, to move here from other locations that might be attractive. Because if you're not able to attract that workforce, it's going to be the workforce problem is just going to get worse.
Mike raises a very good point, specifically in the Hampton Roads area. One of the things that we've targeted is that we want to be able to retain the millennials in Hampton Roads. What we find is that many of those millennials who have grown up in the Hampton Roads area want to go to the larger metropolitan cities. So, they want to go to the Charlottes, they want to go to the Atlantas, they even want to go to the Metro DC. So it's almost been easier for us to recruit from outside of the area than to be able to retain the talent that we've got. So, there's some major initiatives going on in Hampton Roads in an attempt to identify and maintain that talent within our region.
And retaining talent is a very big issue. Virginia does very well in the technology industry and also in the STEM. Virginia has a large STEM job concentration. And I've seen that even with my own kids starting in elementary school. There are a lot of STEM programs out there. So getting the kids involved in the science, technology, engineering, and math fields. But to get those kids interested in that and learning that, that's great, but we've got to keep them here also.
Jennifer, most respondents rated Virginia's business climate as good when compared to other states. What is Virginia doing well to attract and retain businesses, and how could we improve our business climate?
Well, Virginia has a lot of initiatives going on in terms of business development. You can go to the virginia.gov website. There's a Virginia Performs. There's a scorecard that lists all these initiatives that are going on. It was very impressive to look at. But there are also many other things that Virginia can do in terms of community development. Really, what we need to do is be looking at how do we balance pro-business regulation with the tax climate. These are all issues that all states face, but we also need to continue to promote our education in Virginia, and then overall just improve the quality of life so that, again, the common theme to keep the people here, to keep the talent in Virginia.
And a lot of things we've already talked about, workforce development, infrastructure.
Mike, an equal percentage of respondents in the survey, 30%, said that they were either somewhat pessimistic or somewhat optimistic about the national economy. Why do you think opinion is so divided there?
I think for a few reasons. One, we talked earlier about the partisanship within the national government and how it always seems to be gridlock there, and national government not really not working together to take a lot of steps to improve it. The stock market is kind of a circus these days with wild swings up and down, and those things have an impact on how people view the economy. Especially as part of that, it's a global economy here, whether we like it or not, whether you actually deal with global commerce or not. And things that happen in Greece or what's happening in China now, the press around that really can have a negative impact on how people
Jimmy, survey respondents are in favor of reforming rather than repealing the ACA. Is that a sign they expect the law to be permanent after recent court challenges?
If you have the answer to that question, we'd all be a lot better off.
I'm glad you got that one.
I think most people understand and believe that the ACA is here with us to stay in some way, shape, or form. And I think given that understanding, I think most people believe that it would be better to go through some modification rather than a repeal. It's tough to argue against some of the premises that led to the creation of the ACA. But again, there needs to be some modification so that we know exactly what we're doing. We're covering people that need to be covered, but we're improving our overall health care coverage, and we're being able to monitor the cost. And so I think it's an easier sell with the understanding that, yes, it's here. It's not going to be abandoned, but to some extent it does need some modification so that we can all live with it and improve health care for, I guess, certain targeted audiences. Well, improve health care for everybody, but we've got a lot of people that obviously weren't insured and had no coverage. So.
Of our questions, are there any things that we haven't addressed that y'all would like to bring up? Thanks very much. Appreciate all your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Peters, President and CEO of the Virginia Society of CPAs. Thanks for viewing our panel discussion of the 2016 Virginia Economic Expectations Survey. This survey is a partnership between the VSCPA and Virginia Business Magazine. I would like to thank our CPA panelists, Jennifer Duff, Mike Gracik, James Haggard, and John Renner, for lending their expertise and insight behind this survey, as well as all of the individuals who participated in the survey. With their business training and expertise, CPAs offer a unique perspective into the economic issues facing Virginia today. And this survey is our way of sharing that expertise with policymakers and taxpayers alike. Thanks for watching.